David Morgan, the Silver Guru. Welcome to Nature of Reality Radio. I was most impressed seeing your presentation that you did at one of the gold and silver conferences in the not too distant past. Definitely a conference that I'm going to want to go to. I have been buying a lot of gold and silver recently, not just for portfolio and stocking up purposes to prepare for what I think may be a Nassara gold standard, knock on wood, wink, wink, currency reset that we may be having. But also from a spiritual perspective, I got a lot of friends in the spiritual but not religious community who would say that having a lot of sterling silver jewelry is great for the energy perspective. It'll enhance your abundance, but we'll keep that. Keep this interview to a down-to-earth perspective, as I said, and not really get into any of that stuff. However, I do want to point out, though, that some of my audience members that are in the spiritual but not religious community may actually find this interview to be of interest. It's a nice coincidence, though, that I'm interviewing you now for a couple of reasons. Side issue, I'm planning to get my father a silver bullet for as a Father's Day gift because he seems to have a lot of werewolf energy in him when he loses his temper, and I think a silver bullet may actually kill the werewolf energy in him. And also, there is some people that have been focusing on the precession of the equinox thing have said that the Silver Gate is actually on May 22nd, which is my mother's birthday, coincidentally, of this year, 2 days from now. So it's a fitting act of synchronicity that I'm having you on the show in that time period, but not really going to get into what that means. If anybody wants to learn about that, just type Silvergate into a search engine and you'll find this article that Lisa Renee wrote about somewhere. But we'll try to keep this to a stock market down-to-earth perspective. But first, your life story, David Morgan. What did you experience that caused you to decide, okay, I need to make silver and other portfolio and stock market things the purpose of my life? This is definitely some stuff I want to get out to people. What happened that caused you to do that? Tell your life story from a primary source perspective. You got the floor. I will shut up and put myself on mute and give you the floor now.
Well, first off, Andrew, let me thank you for having me. And this is a bit different audience than what I normally get, and I'm very happy about that. I have done interviews pretty much across the spectrum, and some rather long ones in the past. So since we do have more time than usual, I will go a little more in depth about my personal history and how the heck I got connected to the silver market. It's not really that convoluted thinking backwards, but at the time going forwards, I had no idea. But I was an 11-year-old kid, and we lived out pretty much in the country in San Diego County, a place called El Cajon, which is huge now, but at the time it was pretty remote and very rural. And my dad had planted a bunch of fruit trees in California. As you probably well know, fruit, things grow pretty easily. And it was my job to water those trees, keep my room clean, do certain, chores. But the fruit tree watering was really tough for an 11-year-old because we had these big basins around each one, and it probably only took 10 minutes to fill one up. But 10 minutes when you're 11 years old seems like hours. And there were something like 20 trees. So I don't know, it was probably a 2-hour job. I'm going into great detail more than I need to. But the point was that every week I was given 25 cents. And being out in the country and being a saver by nature, I just stacked up those silver coins, one on top of the other, and I'd count them every now and then. And remember, I got a roll of $10 worth of silver quarters. But I didn't think of them as being silver. All I thought about were their quarters. And then one day, my dad gave me a quarter for the week, and it wasn't silver. It was a Johnson slug. And that was in 1965. And when I got that first one, it impressed me negatively. I thought, my goodness, this is interesting. How can this thing be worth the same as these others that I have? It's not silver, but it didn't seem to bother any adults around me. So that was sort of the spark, you might call it. And fast forward later in life, and I was always kind of studious and, kind of a brain. I'm certainly many people far more intelligent than I, but, I was always kind of put in the advanced class and, that kind of stuff. So regardless of it, when I got into 8th grade, I got very interested in civics and Constitution and what lawful money was. And started diving into my own study and discovered that the banking system was basically a fraud, that this whole thing on fractional reserve banking was just made up thin air money, funny money, I call it, something created out of nothing, which seemed totally illegitimate to me. If the Constitution said you could only coin money, then what the heck are we doing just printing these pieces of paper? And so as life moved onward, when I got near the end of high school, my dad asked me what I wanted to do for a living, and basically the answer is what I do now. But when I gave him an answer about being in the financial markets, he exploded, and he said, no way. You know, he associated that with being a stockbroker, and he had some really bad trips in and out of the stock market. And the last thing he wanted to see his son do was be involved in that world. So it was definitely a no. And so I read the little booklet that came with our encyclopedia set called Career Guide, I believe. And I read the whole thing in one week, and it wasn't much of a read. And so I started looking at it, and things, you know, doctor, lawyer, Indian chief, and one that looked like really a cool way to make a living was to fly. And so I went back to my dad and said, okay, since the financial world's out of reach, I think I'd like to fly. And he says, well, that's good. So I about just turned 16. Excuse me, folks, sorry. And started taking flying lessons. So I got every rating you could get. When I was 19, I went to Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, majored in aeronautical engineering. Yeah, passed the SAT with flying colors. Got a little note from the university. Had one of the highest SAT scores in math we've had in a long time. You know, welcome to our university. And away I went. And when I was about 19, I had my instructor's rating. So I started teaching flying at college. And then when I got the summer breaks, I'd come back and I would teach at the flying school where I started to learn to fly. So I had a pretty interesting career. And after that, I got out and got into the aircraft world. But I was always passionate about the markets. When I was 16, I begged my dad to help me get involved in the stock market. And they have what they call the Uniform Gift to Minors Act, which was just a piece of paper you sign and allows someone under 18 to open up an account and start trading stocks. So I've been in the markets, you might say, for a very long time, all through this time I was doing aircraft thing, which was quite exciting at times, but I still was always in the market. So, you know, I say I've just, you know, looking at the metals markets for most of my life. It's a true statement. So one thing led to another. Aircraft career ended. I started working. I worked for a certified financial planner for a while. I also worked in the coin industry for a while, and both those were fairly short-lived. Did some consulting and basically kind of dropped out, you might say, for a while. Then I got excited after my first daughter was born and had this kind of epiphany about where I'll say I knew in quotation marks, who knows the future, right? Some prophets. But for me, I felt I knew what the future held based on my study on history and what happens in all fiat regimes. Eventually, the empire collapses. The Roman Empire is probably a good example of what happens when you go from a, you know, silver coin called a denarius and keep debasing it over and over and over. And eventually, at the end of the society, it isn't a benevolent republic where people really do care about each other, and the political class actually has some morals. It decays into what can I get at the end, you know, rage and plunder and screw the people, and then Rome burns. So I saw that coming and thought, well, after my daughter was born, if she, you know, and you can just, you know, since you have a lot of spiritual types that listen to the show, I mean, for me, I didn't have like a vision, but I had an idea. And it was like, my daughter's 18 and she's looking at me saying, Dad, if you knew so much, why didn't you do something about it? And I, you know, had this, I don't want to make it a big dramatic thing, but I had that thought. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to get back into my passion. My passion is honest money, you know, and I'm going to pursue that. So with the internet, it was much easier than it would be in the old days of a hard copy newsletter where you actually typed it on a, you know, typewriter. In those days, word processors were just coming into the fore, and mail it out to 1,000 people. And no. It's very expensive. It's a very tough business to start once you have it, going, it's a pretty nice business, but usually you have to take 2 or 3 years of total losses before you even turn a meager profit. And I didn't really have those kind of resources at the time, but on the internet, it wasn't nearly as expensive. It was, so start a website, basically a research site for myself, and some people found it, and some guy asked me, what does the Silver Guru do? And I said, well, I write a newsletter. And he says, wow, that's kind of cool. How much is it? And I go, well, I've been in business. Now, this is my thoughts going in my head. So I'm not answering this over the phone. I'm thinking about it. And I go, God, I've been in business for 12 milliseconds. What did I tell this guy? So I came up with a number, and he said, fine. And I gave him my address. He sent a check, and I was in business. So that's how the whole thing started. And of course, it's growing considerably from that time, but I think it has to do with my passion and perseverance, because the first year I was in business, I made like $6,000 for the year. So it wasn't like a get rich quick scheme or early retirement, but it was a passion. So probably over answered your question. I don't think I've ever given that long an answer before, but you asked, so I'm back to you, Andrew. Shoot me the next one.
Yes, and by the way, if you don't want to go full 2 hours, that's okay. That's just the maximum. I don't want to go over 2 hours because humans have lousy attention spans, and doing 2-hour shows has cost me a potentially big audience in some ways. But the information that you can give out is definitely very valuable. I do got some things here as a guide to help me throughout the program, including your YouTube videos, your web page, and well, regarding that presentation that I saw in that you gave at the conference, there were some things that you pointed out, and one of the more comical things I remember was when you were giving names of people who were supporting some of the things that you were promoting. You mentioned some wealthy people, and I noticed the tone on your face when you mentioned Bill Gates wasn't really that great. I don't blame you, considering that ever since he got rid of his position as the Microsoft head, the only thing he's good for is poisoning people with needles. But I understand where you're coming from when you suggest that wealthy people, if they're supporting this, then it's definitely something that people should look at, and nothing wrong with that. And when it comes to silver and gold, there's a lot of controversy regarding which one's better and which one isn't. And I mean, you asked the question, what if silver were as good as gold? And there was this David Wilcock had a good friend named I'm drawing a blank on his name, but anyhow, he recently passed away. Oh yeah, Pete Peterson. He recently passed away, and he said in his landmark Project Camelot interview that that why would it make any sense to get gold? I mean, if you're going to use gold as a medium of exchange, well, why not better use silver? Because if someone's going to sell you a loaf of bread for a piece of silver, then if you would think that gold would get you a lot more bread. But of course, when it comes down to it, gold, silver, and all the other precious metals and everything else in the universe is only worth what we as a species decide it's worth, which raises the question, if we were to go to a gold standard, how in the hell are we supposed to know what the set price is, the worth value is of the gold and the silver, so that it won't allow, and this is in a perfect world, of course, it won't allow for any rigging or corruption on Wall Street, so they can't screw us over in that regard, which the bankers have been able to do a lot easier with this phony fiat debt-based system. Any comments?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. I don't mean to interrupt. Are you done?
Yeah, I'm done.
Okay. No, that's probably one of the best questions you can ask, and so let me run with it. So I've been on this, I guess you'd say, on this adjunct to the silver market that I haven't pursued strongly before, and now I'm making it a focus for a while. And that is this gold-silver ratio and the question of money, which has been the main question of my life, really, going back to being an 11-year-old kid and saying, is this new stuff really money or not? And the answer is it's not. It's a slug, but I digress. So to come back, the whole idea about a gold standard is that gold is a policeman on the currency, and if you have a gold standard, you can exchange those pieces of paper for a set amount of gold. And that's basically what the Bretton Woods Agreement was all about, was we're going on a dollar standard, but the dollar is tied to gold. And this dollar is exchangeable internationally only. Not U.S. citizens were not allowed at law to own gold, only international trade. So going back to your bread example, you can make large transactions from the United States of America to France or Spain or Germany or Australia or China or whomever, and it was exchanged in these dollars, quote unquote, and you could exchange for gold. Well, de Gaulle had a economist called Charles Ruff that basically, I might have the first name wrong. Anyway, Ruff is the correct last name. And he basically educated Mr. de Gaulle on the problems with the fiat system. So de Gaulle started to call the bluff of the United States and say, here's your paper. I want the gold. You say it's good as gold? Make it good as gold. And started draining out some of the gold reserves of the United States. And other countries are doing it as well, but he really kind of was the icing on the cake. And after that's when Nixon, in August 15, 1971, said, we're closing a gold window. And all of this about gold backing and all that, I'm not against it. But what I've learned and restudied, and I knew it early on, but I've come back to it, and that's, what if silver were treated like gold? There's an article not written by me. I'm glad that someone thought of it, but it's called Gold Standard Equals Fiat in Disguise. And the argument goes like this, and I think people can follow it, that if you can only measure, and you said it in your question, Andrew, I don't know if you recall your exact question, but if you can only measure gold in terms of paper, then how do you really measure it? I mean, if an ounce of gold is worth 1,750 US fiat Federal Reserve notes, that's just a number versus a paper. But if the true value of paper is zero, that means gold's infinity in terms of paper. I mean, you can look at the Weimar Republic, and you can look at Zimbabwe, you can look at Venezuela, you can look at Argentina, and since they don't have advanced capital markets and they're not the reserve currency of the world, they basically just print to infinity, and this paper is worthless, which is its true intrinsic value. It actually has some BTU value. You can burn it for energy. But so this is the path that we're headed toward. And I do believe after this deflationary scare, and it's really stagflation, we're going to have deflation in some arenas and inflation in others. It's the worst of all worlds. Things cost more for stuff that you need, like food, and things on rent will maybe go down, but a lot of things that we take for granted won't be available anymore. So back to the gold standard, it really doesn't work. Once you go to gold only, then you go to fiat. Once you go to fiat, you go to failure. However, in an honest money system, if you have to measure gold in terms of silver, now you have a check and balance on the entire system. But you can't do a fixed rate. You can't do a Sir Isaac Newton and say that 15.5 ounces of silver equal 1 ounce of gold forever and always, because they have different properties, they're used differently, and they are treated differently by the public at large. Some people determine that silver is more valuable than gold, then the ratio will change. And people think that gold's more valuable than silver, the ratio will change the other direction. But it's an ebb and flow, as it should be. The market will determine what the correct ratio is. So if you go back in history to ancient Egypt, it took 2.5 ounces of silver to buy 1 ounce of gold. And it's never been above 20 to 1 for over 5,000 years. It's only been in the last 120, 125 years or so where the gold silver ratio has gotten above 100. And only one time did it go above 100 in 5,500 years of recorded history. And that was very, very recently, where it hit about 125 to 1. As we're doing the interview here in latter part of May, I think it's the 20th of May, the ratio has just hit 100 again. But it's gone from 125 down to 100, which means over the last few weeks, silver has actually outperformed gold. But my point, I don't think, has been emphasized enough. My point is that you can't have an honest money system without at least a bimetallic standard, where gold is regulated by the amount of silver, and in a trimetallic system where you have gold, silver, and copper, and they all float. In other words, someone that wants copper might offer 100 cents for $1 worth of silver. And by the way, a dollar is a measure. I'm going to digress. I say this on most of my interviews, but a dollar by law is 371.25 grains of 999 fine silver, which is roughly 3/4 of a troy ounce. So if you pull out a silver eagle out of your stash and you look at it, it'll say $1 on it, but it's 1 ounce, which is really about 25% more than a dollar weight. So the Treasury doesn't even know what a dollar is anymore. But I come back. So when you're getting dollars, it says Federal Reserve note, but it also says dollar on it. That's a lie. So if you have a check and balance, but this I think was known at some point in time. I'm not sure it was known in the late 1800s where, the banksters basically came in and said, we are going to a gold only standard. And as I've said in other interviews, and you can check that video presentation that I did, and it's on the net a couple times, what if silver were treated like gold? And you can determine for yourself. But the whole idea about the Wizard of Oz was a metaphor for the banksters taking over a bimetallic standard and going to a gold only standard, and then from there going to fiat only. It's a very interesting study. I won't go in depth, but you can get a movie for free on the internet by Bill Still, and I think it's called The Secrets of Oz. It's a very interesting movie to watch, and it goes a great deal into some of the negatives about a gold only standard, actually. So I think that's probably been beaten to death, but true honest money system requires at least a bimetallic standard, and without it, you're in a gold only, which is controlled by, the old adage that he who owns the gold makes the rules. Well, if the banks own the gold, then they make the rules. And that's basically what happened in 1873 when they demonetized silver officially. And of course, it even holds true today. Most of the gold is held by the banks. It's almost a 50-50 split now. About half of the world's investment gold is held by the banking system, and the other half is basically scattered out amongst the public, at large, not just the yous and me's, but, money managers, hedge funds, pension funds have some, but most of the investment world, financial world, poo-poos gold. There aren't many enlightened, let's say, people that understand monetary history and how fiat systems actually end up destroying themselves, that will take advantage of the price when it's low to hedge their bets that this thing's going to fail. I just don't know when. But silver really holds the key. It's the people's money, and the real power is actually with the people, because the banks don't really hold any silver as a monetary reserve. So if the people held the silver as a monetary reserve, at some point we would actually dictate what the correct ratio is. But in order for that to happen, you have to have a lot more people involved than there are right now. All the financial assets of the world represented by gold is about 1% of the total paper paradigm that's out there in the stock and bond market. But in the silver ratio, it's only 0.02%. That's right, 0.02% of the financial assets in the world are covered by silver. And to think that not too long ago, China was the last to be on a silver standard. And if silver were the money, as the primary money, as the dollar standard really is, it's really a silver standard that was created when the country was founded. If we were actually on a system like that now, the amount of silver that you would need to purchase a home would be rather minuscule. You wouldn't need very much, because its value in the marketplace would be equal to the scarcity of it as a monetary asset. But it's not treated that way at all. In fact, there's actually a group called the Silver Users Association. Is my view, my studied view, is the primary purpose of that is to keep it as an industrial metal only and keep the price as low as possible. And of course, this is done with all commodities. It's done with, beef cattle, feeder cattle, corn, wheat, rice, soybean meal, cotton, cocoa, coffee, silver, gold, you name it. All of those markets are highly distorted because of the way the system is set up. And is it set up that way deliberately? And the answer is absolutely it is. So I think I killed that one. Hopefully it was clear. Andrew, you give me some feedback if I was a little murky and unclear. I'll try to do a better job.
No, you were very clear. You explained it very well. But there's still a lot of questions that people would have about this. And well, first of all, I've heard someone say that the price of gold is dependent on the market, and the price of silver is dependent on the economy. Do you, by any chance, have any idea what the person may have meant when they said that?
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. I do. I'm going to guess. I think I do. Until I give them feedback, we haven't communicated. So I'll communicate, and he may say, "Oh, David, he nailed it, or he didn't get a clue what I was saying." And I think what that means is that gold is a market. It's a financial instrument. It really serves very little purpose other than preserving wealth. And as you started your show, basically it's what humans agree upon. If we agree that seashells is the best form of maintaining your savings and doing trade with each other, then it's seashells. Obviously, I'm not a big seashell proponent. I'm kind of a silver guy, as we all know, and I'm trying to be a little funny here. But the point is that during all of recorded history, it's always gone to gold and silver. It hasn't ever become a seashell standard for a very long point in time, although it has been practiced in some areas. So back to the question, yeah, gold is a financial instrument determined by the financial markets, whereas silver, since its industrial use is 70% of the market, is more or less determined by the economy because its monetary relationship has basically faded away more and more and more over modern time, from basically 1900 to present day. So silver, since it's used as the most useful metal, the most useful element outside of oil, there's more patents for new uses of silver than anything else on the planet except oil. And just to digress a bit in the oil market, I mean, not only does it run your car and your lawnmower and jet airplanes, but it's all these plastics, all these polymers, pharmaceuticals. I mean, oil touches our lives 100 times a day, every day, and you don't even think about it. But coming back to silver, silver is not quite as ubiquitous, but close. I mean, we couldn't have today's society without silver. I mean, if we got rid of gold and there wasn't any gold available, let's say the planet didn't have any gold, just silver. Let's reverse that. Let's just say that there wasn't any silver, and you can think about it any way you want. I'm just trying to do a quick thought experiment here. So let's say we had no silver. Would we have the same technological advancement that we have now? And the answer is no. We wouldn't. You need silver for computers, flat screen TVs, membrane switches like a microwave oven or a keyboard on your computer or laptop. You need it for obviously solar panels. You need it for water purification. Basically, you said you're not religious, but I was kind of on a roll in one of my speeches in Vancouver one time years ago, and it just suddenly hit me to wrap up the speech. And I said, silver conducts heat better than any element known to man, and silver reflects light better than any element known to man. So how did I say it? If you don't feel the heat, if you don't see the light, that's what I said. If you don't see the light, you're going to feel the heat. So I thought it was kind of cute. It just came to me out of nowhere. But silver is a very unique element, and it's extremely essential. It cannot be substituted in almost any application. Sometimes you can substitute it. In some applications, you can use gold, but that's going to cost you 100 times more. You could substitute platinum or palladium in some cases, but it'll be an inferior product because it doesn't reflect light as well or conduct electricity as well. But it could be used, and it's a fairly good conductor. I mean, these are good, excellent conductors. Copper works as a good conductor, but not as good as silver. So silver is essential. It's absolutely required for our modern day technological society. And if you think about it, or at least how I think about it, is maybe one of the reasons that the banksters unknowingly demonetized it in 1873 might have been, and maybe one of them, knew it, or 10 of them knew it. I don't know. I doubt it. But that, look, this stuff is way too valuable to be money. Well, wait a minute. Isn't money supposed to be valuable? No, it's way too valuable to be money. So we're going to demonetize it because we need it for technology in the future. And we'll just keep the price cheap. We'll create an association that's whole purpose in life is to buddy with each other, create a monopoly, and make sure that the price stays where we need it to be so we can maximize our profits at the expense of everybody else. But as I said earlier, we have the power. We could actually change that. And all we need to do is what Max Kaiser said years ago, buy silver and take down JP Morgan. And I would say corny. It's actually apropos, but not enough people caught on to it. A lot of people did. I think he brought a lot of people in the silver market. It's just that Silver is not so rare that it's like palladium, where it takes very little buying and all of a sudden the price just starts to shoot up. There's enough silver out there. We'll take some momentum, but believe me, there's enough people to buy 1 ounce of silver. I mean, if everybody in the United States bought 2 ounces of silver, they'd buy up the annual supply. And the United States is only 5% of the world's population. So 5% of the world's population buying roughly $35 worth of silver would put the power back into people's hands like overnight.
Yes, and you pointed out that you said I'm not religious. I'm spiritual, but not religious. And I mentioned that silver, a lot of my spiritual friends say wear sterling silver because it can generate wealth and abundance. And gold, on the other hand, if you wear it, it's more, they say it's better for defensive purposes, like protects you from negative energies. So silver is more of an offense and gold is a defense when you wear it, but when you consume it, it's kind of the opposite. When you got silver in a colloidal silver, it protects you as a defense, but monatomic gold, which I've actually started taking a few days ago, and I like the results so far, 6 drops a day in the morning, the alchemical elixir of the Anunnaki, they call it. It's actually advertised that on the bottle, and I mean, it's a completely different state of matter, but it seems to be a good offense there in terms of enhancing physical and somewhat spiritual abilities, but that falls out of the realm of this interview, so I'm not really going to go there. But it's interesting. It is interesting, though, how these elements seem to have different qualities. And since I mentioned that, you did mention it's a 3-metal thing with gold, silver, and copper. Now that raises the question, how does platinum, palladium, and rhodium get involved with this? It's an interesting fact that Money Metals Exchange, that website, that's where I buy my gold and silver whenever I have enough money to do it. They were, last I checked, sold out of palladium, platinum, and rhodium, which were, I think, rhodium and palladium are more expensive than gold. Platinum used to be more expensive than gold, but there was a platinum shock recently where if you check the graphs, you'll see that gold did become more valuable than platinum in the not too distant past. And if it's not too much trouble, could you, if you know anything about this, what exactly is the reason for why that happened? What made platinum less valuable than gold, and how do rhodium and palladium factor into this and determining their values and whatnot?
Sure. So if you go back to Aristotle's model of what is money, and I don't have them memorized, but basically it has to be rare, has to be fungible. Fungible means like every ounce is like every other ounce. So a silver round of 1 ounce of weight is equal to a silver eagle minted by the United States Mint. They're both 999 fine silver, regardless of how they're stamped. One's stamped by a government, one's stamped by a private mint. They're still identical weight and they're still identical elements. So that's fungible. They have to be divisible. They have to be recognizable. And again, they have to have value on their own. There's probably 1 or 2 other standards for money. Platinum and palladium actually fit all of those as a classic, what I'll call a classic monetary definition, but no one uses them as money, really. So even though they would fit the definition, we look at both of those as industrial metals only. And they trade based on their industrial use, or as your person that asked the question, on their economic merit, not on their monetary merit. If they traded on their monetary merit, it would be rather interesting because the noble metals, platinum and palladium, are 15 times more rare than gold. Gold is extremely rare, but platinum and palladium are very rare, 15 times rarer than gold. So going back to the question on gold, platinum, basically what took place back in the early 2000s was that the EPA put standards out for pollution control of automobiles in the United States. So the engineers came up with a catalytic converter, which basically was a process to make sure that the emissions coming out of the exhaust of your automobile met certain standards as dictated by the mandate to have clean air. And what happened was the platinum market had a bigger demand on it because it's only used as jewelry pretty much in Japan. Platinum is just an industrial metal basically everywhere else. And platinum started getting more and more expensive. And someone at Ford Motor Company determined that palladium could actually fill the bill of platinum and be used in catalytic converters. And it was much, much cheaper at that time than platinum was. So Ford Motor got the idea that they would stop their assembly line on their catalytic converters and it would switch out from platinum to palladium. Except they didn't have me or someone like me in their logistics department or as their COO, and I'm kind of making a joke about that, but they had no idea because everybody's taught about this just-in-time inventory and there's infinite everything just in time, the way the world works, which is a it is really a joke. I mean, it's not true. Of course, they're finding that out now with the CV, and believe me, we're going to learn a lot more about it over the next few years. But I come back to the question. So Ford said, we're going to buy palladium, and we're going to save a bunch of money by switching platinum out of the catalytic converters use palladium. So they put their order in for palladium. And I forget the numbers, I don't have a chart in front of me, but it went something from then $100 an ounce to $1,100 an ounce. And it went up like overnight practically. In fact, in the futures market, they basically got everybody out. I was actually long palladium at the time. I used to trade the PGMs in the futures market almost every January because there's a seasonality to them that whoever buys the physical metal usually bought it in January probably for the year. And there was usually a pretty good trend that you could get on for the January trade. And so I was called by my broker to pony up more money. And I said, wait a minute, I've got a lot of equity in my account. Palladium's moving high. He goes, doesn't matter if you're long or you're short, your margin requirements go up, Y or X amount. And I won't tell you the number X because it was very large relative to what my account size was. And I was forced out to sell at a profit, but nothing like I could have made if I was able to stay in the market to $1,100 an ounce. This is where it went in the early 2000s. So that's when you really saw this shift where platinum was kind of second cousin to palladium. And the reason that it was used, palladium substituting for platinum, was because of cost efficiency by Ford. Ford just didn't know how small those markets are. Rhodium, I really won't comment on. There's, anytime you get in the exotics like rhodium, platinum, or palladium, there's huge spreads. So you might buy platinum for 800, and if you want to sell it the next day, you're going to sell it for 700, even though the paper price might be 800. I'm exaggerating slightly, but I want people to know in those metals, if you're going to take them, make sure you got your gold and silver. The exotics are going to have a big spread when you sell back. Rhodium's ridiculous. I looked at it yesterday, so I have this fresh in my mind. 7,000, 4,000. So if you want to buy it, it was 7,000. But if you want to sell it, you'd only get 4,000 for it. So those are markets pretty much to stay away from unless you really know what you're doing. But I'm free market. If you want to go for it, go for it. I think palladium's pretty much topped out. Going from I actually recommended palladium to the Morgan Report subscribers at a good time. I think it was around 600. But I got out too early personally. I think some of my members are still holding, but it's gone from that 600 up to, as we know, 2,200. So that's really the story. They're really not considered money, industrial metals. They switched. And so now, since platinum really is just jewelry and used somewhat in catalytic converters, but not nearly to the extent that it used to be, there is not the demand on it as much as there used to be. And because of that fact, it's actually, as you said, gone under the price of gold substantially. I think for a long-term investor, and again, if you have your gold and silver and you're kind of on the wealthy side, you might consider a small amount of platinum. I think it will catch up to gold at least in the future, but that's a long shot. I really don't know. It's certainly not acting very well, except the last couple of weeks it started to move, but it's hard to project where it will go. And of course, I think the automobile industry is in all kinds of trouble. There's a huge oversupply of automobiles on a global basis. And then you've got Uber and less demand and less oil usage and on it goes. So the last place I'd want to be involved right now would be in the automotive industry.
Thank you. And in regards to copper, interesting thing, I've seemed to have been rewarded by the spirits, pick up a lot of litter, and as a reward of sorts, I found that and I'm saying this to give advice to people because the world will reward you if you do good things. I've actually found some copper in the street ever since I've made a habit out of picking up litter. A nice rectangular piece of copper, and even found a piece of copper that was phallic in shape, nature of all things. Definitely something worth storing away for value. Got nothing to lose and everything to gain to save it. But I've heard that even though they refer to copper as poor man's silver, there's been the word on the street that it may actually be worthwhile to invest in copper in the near future, because if the Trump administration really does want to take rebuilding America's infrastructure a lot more seriously, then that means copper is going to be a lot more useful in regards to fixing the infrastructure, which means it may be in your best interest to invest in copper. Do you agree or disagree?
Not sure on that one, but I still obviously am pretty good at making comments. First of all, let's just look at copper on a monetary basis. So, when I grew up, similar to the silver story, right? It went from, silver coins, dimes, nickels, dimes, quarters, half dollars were silver, 90%, to Johnson slugs, which were dimes and quarters and half dollars that were made of basically pot metal. Copper is the same thing. I mean, when I was a kid, the wheat-backed penny was copper. But at some point, and I forget what year it was, I'd have to look it up, but several years ago now, the copper in a penny was worth 3 cents. So you could get pretty wealthy by taking the copper penny and hoarding them and melting them down. Not that you're allowed to do that legally, but you were getting 3 cents worth of value for 1 cent's worth of price. So you could definitely triple your money if you knew what you're doing just by hoarding copper pennies. So the government realized that it was costing them 3 cents for something at a price of 1 cent, and they stopped producing copper pennies and went to zinc. So that's why we don't have any copper pennies anymore. So that's the monetary side. On the industrial side, I'm not sure where we're going. I don't. First of all, what you said is correct. I mean, we in the commodities space call copper Dr. Copper. And the reason we give it the designation doctor is because copper is a good indicator for global economic health. So if the copper market's moving higher, it usually indicates, and it's a very good indicator, that things are getting better and better, and there's more people at work, the economy's strong, there's more things being built and all that stuff. However, with this supply chain breakdown, mines closing because of the CV-19 and all this stuff, I'm remiss to say where I think copper is going to go. I'm actually, to be loyal to my readership, my paid readership, I'm negative on it right now. They know that I'm very straight up, and when I see a change, they'll be the first to know. But for right now, I'm standing aside. I like copper, but I'm just not assured of where we're going economically other than down. And I'll expand on that, not to scare anybody, but it's maybe it's a wake up, shake up kind of a moment. Well, every month that I've produced the Morgan Report, and it's more than me, I have a staff, it's not a big staff, but it's not just me. And I start with a quote, and the quote usually has to do with something about money or finance or economics. And in April, so 2 months ago in that letter, I started the quote for the Morgan Report with this quote: "The next Great Depression will make the last Great Depression look like a small technical correction." And that was written or said actually by Elliot Janeway, who was a private economist that was, in my view, way ahead of his time, certainly knew what fiat systems do in the long run, and thought that the stock markets, or the markets in general, were speculative casinos, too many derivatives, too many unbacked things, too much marginal use of capital. Anyway, the point is that I think he's right. I don't think that this depression will necessarily get as bad as the 30s in some metrics, but in some ways it'll be worse, meaning stuff that we take for granted in this reign of abundance that we've had basically my whole lifetime is going to cease. It doesn't mean everything goes away. It just means things that we take for granted will cease. And having grapes any time of the year, for example, will only be seasonal in some areas that have grapes nearby. The idea that you can get the latest fashion every 3 months because the season changes, that'll be something of the past. There'll be lots of things. I can go on, but you get the idea that we're going to have a huge contraction in the economy. People are going to be saving their money for stuff that they need, not what they want. Things that used to be highly prized will be less prized, the exotic car, or the super airplane, or the, luxury item this or luxury item that. People will be much more focused on survival and food and, how to pay the rent. Similar to the 30s, you'll probably see a lot of families where they consolidate. It's mom and dad, grandpa and grandma, and maybe the kids and their kids under one roof. It won't be everywhere. It'll be different in different places, but on an aggregate, on an average, on the whole, you'll see a lot of contraction in the global economy, and it's just not the U.S. It'll be everywhere. So that, to me, spiritually is quite a lesson that I think probably a lot of your listeners are already well aware of. It's valuing what you have, not what you have. If you are really spiritually fit, from my perspective, if you're really fit, you can take everything material from a man or a woman and still be the same human being because you're not attached to it. But there's people out there that probably have a very good gold position, much larger than mine. And when they see the repercussions of this global contraction, even though they have preserved their wealth in terms of how much purchasing power they have, won't be able to handle the reality of walking out that front door anymore, because all those things that they are attached to mean so much to them because they are, let's say, less spiritually developed, if I can say it in that way, and won't be able to cope with it. So it's not necessarily a matter of what you have externally or your material possessions. It's much more a function of what you have internally and how big your heart is. That's what's really going to determine our next move forward. Not that we aren't material beings and we are, spiritual beings living in a material body, or however you want to phrase it. And we have to eat, and we have to have shelter, and we have to have clothing and all that. I'm not discounting that. I'm just trying to change the paradigm of thinking about it, where it becomes all that is necessary is so much. You don't need, 27 pairs of pants. You probably need 2 or whatever. And this is where the thinking is going to go. I think we're going to be forced, we meaning largely everybody. I mean, not everybody. Some of the super rich will still have more stuff, but it's going to be a lot more gratitude for what you have and a lot more understanding of the value of connecting with each other than connecting with things. So there's my pitch on that. I didn't mean to get too spiritual on you, but I know your audience is that way, and it just came to me. And you know me, I speak from my head and heart. So next question, please.
Yes, and there's a couple of issues that are problematic in the metals market that I've heard about. To what degree maybe you know about them? Well, I'm going to ask you to give your take, of course. Let's go 2 birds with 1 stone here. The first one has to do with mining. I've heard something about how there seems to be a lot more copper in the silver than the miners want there to be. And I've also heard about the issue of gold-covered tungsten. Boy, who deserves a longer prison sentence? The person who sells rock candy masquerading as methamphetamine, or someone who sells tungsten covered in gold masquerading as genuine gold? I think the person who sells the gold-covered tungsten deserves a longer prison sentence because, well, that's more money involved in terms of value, methamphetamine versus gold and all that. But fraud either way. But the point is, the issue of why would it be a problem to, like with the miners, they seem to think it's a problem that the copper and the silver are getting mixed together more than they want. I mean, don't they have the technology to fix that, you would think? And also, do you know anything about the gold covered tungsten issue that some in the conspiracy field have brought up?
Yes, I do. I'll take that one on because I'm pretty clear on the question. On the other one, I'm going to have to just kind of move around it and try to hone in on it. But on the gold tungsten thing, it's absolutely a fact that tungsten is very, very close to gold in atomic weight. So it's reasonable, if you're going to cheat, that you could take tungsten and gold plate it, and plate it rather heavily, like, a 1/4 inch or 1/2 inch. Because when you're talking a 100-ounce bar or a 400-ounce bar, tungsten's much cheaper, and gold is expensive. But if you're only going to have to coat it with a 1/2 inch thick worth of gold and then stamp it as, pure gold, you could get away with it. It happened. Now, how much exists, no one knows. Well, I don't know. Someone probably knows, at some bank that they took it all and assayed it and determined, we were frauded with 6 bars out of 1,000 or whatever. I don't know the number. What I do know is what very few talk about, and this is conjecture or speculation on my part. The Chinese new standard is kilo gold, and they took a lot of their bars and had them refined in the Swiss refineries into kilo bars. And I submit for your consideration and those of your listeners that the only reason that was really done was the Chinese wanted to make sure that they got rid of all the tungsten coated bars and they got back just pure 999 fine gold in kilo bars. So that's conjecture, but why else would you do it? I mean, I can't think of another reason logically why you would take gold that's sitting on the shelf that's gold. Why would you want to refine it? Well, if you suspected that there was tinkering with their monetary asset, and China and Russia have been buying gold hand over fist for a long time, and you found some tainted bars, how do you find the rest of them? Well, you refine them, and that's expensive. Gold is heavy. I mean, you got to fly it over to Switzerland. You got to pay for that transportation. You got to pay the refiner to melt it down and make sure it's pure. You got to get them to, pour it or sometimes extrude it into a kilo bar, and then you got to ship it back. So it's not like it's something you do because it's fun to do. It costs money to do it, but they feel it was worth it. So that's something that very seldom comes up. On the copper silver, I'm just going to kind of go around the bush on this one because I'm not exactly sure, but 25% of the world's silver comes from copper mines. So most silver mines are not pure silver. They're lead, zinc, silver, copper, gold, silver. So almost all cases, it's sort of a mixed bag. You might have other elements with the silver. 70% of the world's silver comes as a byproduct of lead, zinc, and copper. 13% of the silver supply is a result of gold mining. There's only 20% roughly of the silver that comes to the market as a result of a silver miner. And even a primary silver miner is a gold silver or lead silver or copper silver. It's just that it's a very silver rich mine versus the other elements. So for example, Hecla Mining is a good example. They can be a silver company if the gold silver ratio is like 60 or below, but if the ratio is above 60, they're actually a gold company because the gold is more, it takes more ounces of silver to buy an ounce of gold, which means it's cheaper relative to gold. So anyway, I think it could be something to do with that. And the refinery process, Andrew, you nailed it. I mean, the metallurgical abilities in today's world are excellent. And so if you have even what we call nasties in the trade, like arsenic or some of these other elements that are really tough to leach out or can't leach out, you have to put a separate mining circuit to get them out of the element you want, the mineral you want. It can be achieved. So I'm not sure exactly what that means, but that's my best stab at it.
Fair enough. And you mentioned gold is heavy, and kind of leads into my next question about Fort Knox, gold being heavy. One of my, I remember when I was a kid, one of my favorite cartoons, watching Pinky and the Brain. There was one episode where they tried to take over the world by robbing the gold from Fort Knox, and that plan fell. Brain, even though he was a genius mouse, didn't realize just how heavy gold was, and he realized his plan wasn't going to go anywhere when they broke into the vault and tried to steal the gold, and they realized they couldn't lift it because they're just mice. Well, the point about Fort Knox, though, is there really gold in there? I mean, we all know the story. We were shown it on TV. They say, yeah, there's gold. Here it is. And then everybody was like, yeah, how do you know we weren't bamboozled and you just didn't show us something that was masquerading as gold? So do you have any comment on the Fort Knox, is there gold in there issue?
Yes, I do. There's been a few documentaries about it, and I refer back to Bill Still, Billstill, Not only did he do Secrets of Oz, but he did another one. I forget the name of it. It might be Money Masters, but if you type in Bill Still Fort Knox Gold, I'm sure it'll pop up on a search engine. And that has to do with your question, is the gold in Fort Knox? And his take is it's not there. My take is I doubt it, but I don't know. It's conjecture. There's no real proof to my knowledge. There's never been an audit. I should say never. There has not been an audit since 1953, a full audit. There's been partial audits where they go into one of the rooms and audit, yep, there's, X amount of bars, and yep, they all weigh what they're supposed to. Yep, we're done. Oh, wait a minute. You just audited about 10% of the total holdings. Where is the other 90% even there? We don't know. So I am suspect. I've also made the comment, and I want to make it again, that if all the gold is there, location doesn't prove ownership. So you could have all the gold, the 265 million troy ounces that the Treasury says we have, about 8,100 tons, if I remember the number correctly. And it could all be loaned to the to the London bankers, who have loaned it to the Chinese bankers, who have hypothecated it to the European bankers, who've, it just goes on, this daisy chains, because once you get into the futures markets and you understand how they work, you basically got a fractional reserve gold system, just like a fractional reserve banking system. The idea being of the old goldsmiths that started this whole thing, basically, we held all the gold, but only about 10% of the people ever come back and ask for it. So we can print up more of these warehouse receipts than actually there's gold to back it, and no one will be the wiser, because only 1 out of 10 ever comes to get their gold. So let's party while we can. Let's print up 9 times more receipts for gold than really exist. Fractional reserve gold. Well, that's been done again and again and again. It's the same old story. It's the same old crime. It's dishonest. It's counterfeiting. It's illegal. But governments give the banks the authority to do an illegal act by their mandate.
Right. And earlier you mentioned something about how they realized that because the pennies, you could actually make 3 cents out of 1 cent when the pennies were made of copper. Well, even in the present day, it costs like 1.8 cents to manufacture a 1 cent penny, but yet we're still manufacturing pennies. I'm sure that you can probably find a few pennies with the date 2020 on them. And I'm thinking, what's the point? Why? Why not just make things simple and make the price of everything divisible by a nickel? So make it end in 0.05 or 0.0. So it's so you don't have to take pennies out of the equation. Well, easier said than done with all the pennies out there. But why? What's the sense in continuing to make pennies if it's going to cost more to make a penny than a penny? Do you have an answer to that question?
Oh yeah, no, excellent question. So I'm going to digress again to answer the question. So remember at the beginning of this interview, I said we lived in San Diego County. Well, we used to go to Tijuana once in a while, and being just fascinated by money and finance as a young guy. The first trip to Mexico, I'll never forget it, because when we went into one of their markets, one of the stores, there was a little like ashtray out there and had all these pesos in there that people just threw in there. And I realized my, brainy brain, or not brainy brain, but I just observed, that weight. What that means is that the peso is worth so little that people are willing to just throw them in a jar or in an ashtray. So when they make a purchase, they can just dig into this pile of pennies, these pesos, and complete their purchase. They have so little value. Well, we see that all the time now, right? And so what happens when that takes place is exactly, Andrew, what you said. It won't last for long. They'll just basically round everything to a nickel. In fact, that happens now in some of the places that I wouldn't say frequent, but I've been to. And they'll just round it up to, and do you mind? They'll ask me if it's negative to me. And if it is, I'll say, and they'll round it to my favor by 2 pennies or 3 or whatever it is. So I think it is going away. I think you're absolutely correct. and there's no need to have it. It has so little value or so little meaning. But, if you go back into, David Copperfield, or, into the classics with some of the ideas about 2 coppers being worth something. I mean, $1, 3/4 of a troy ounce of gold used to be a good wage for a day. If you go back to Roman times, a dime was a Roman soldier's wage. So how many coppers made up a dime? Well, I don't know back in Rome, but I know in, my early years, 10 cents, 10 pieces of copper made 1 dime, and 10 dimes made $1. And that was a trimetallic standard. And you know what? Prices were pretty doggone stable back then.
Right, and in the present day, and this is very dear to my heart because I've been trying to be the kid who tries to educate his parents. I mean, my family has never really had financial issues, with my mother being an ophthalmologist who runs her own business, and a father who was in the TI and computer industry, and always had enough money to put food on the table. But when it comes to understanding like the value of money versus and what's good for the economy, my parents, as intelligent as they are, they seem so lost. And I've tried to explain to them it's so much better to have money that has intrinsic that has value, rather than money that has no intrinsic value. And one of the people that presented, I don't know if it was the same conference that you presented at, but one of the gold and silver conferences, talked about how the reason it's so hard for people to make sense of a gold standard is because they've spent their whole lives, everybody in the present day has, under the thumb of the Nixon shock. Well, with that being said, what in the hell are people like me who want to get straighten people out and realize that you're looking at this all wrong with money? What advice, or if there is any advice to give, to make them understand, look, the Nixon shock was not good for everyone. Every excuse that was given to make it good is obviously bull crap. I mean, Mike Maloney, one of his videos he recently did, he showed tons and tons of graphs about how everything after 1971, when the Nixon shock happened, everything's been taking a turn for the worse, and people still don't get it. What advice do you have to make people get it?
Well, the answer is a simple one, but it's education, and Mike and I are actually pretty close friends, and, I will commend him publicly, and I've done more than once in the public. I mean, I just want to congratulate him on making the Hidden Secrets of Money series, because it's probably one of the best ones out there to understand exactly what's going on with the monetary system and why it's as important as you state, Andrew. I'll give you another one that's a quicker way to go, and maybe you could follow it up with the Hidden Secrets of Money. But if you go to my webpage at themorganreport.com and you go to the About tab, if you click the About tab, you'll see my shiny face. But below my shiny face, there's a movie called The Four Horsemen. It's an hour and a half long. It's for free. You can play it on your computer. You can copy the URL, put it on your phone or your flat screen or wherever you want to play it, your tablet, doesn't matter, and watch that. And that touches on basically the whole financial structure and why it's in the shape that it's in and what's going to happen most likely in the future. And that movie was made a long time ago, long in my life, meaning probably more than a decade ago. But it's a very quick, very pertinent, accurate, and I think succinct study on the current financial system, where most people that are like your parents, pretty well involved with their daily lives, but don't really have time to question the most important topic of all, and that is our money valuable or not? And that movie, The Four Horsemen, I think is a good way to educate a lot of people quickly. Mike's series is more in depth and probably gives a better understanding of money per se, but it's not a quick overview like this other movie. So I would suggest that for people that are probably involved and maybe want to get a reinforcement of what they already know, and or send it out on your Facebook or your Twitter or wherever else. And also for people you know and care about, like your parents, say, hey, plus the advantage is it's not you saying it. It's like, hey, these guys are considered to be some of the better thought leaders on the planet. They've got very liberal people. They've got some conservative people. It's not just left or right. It's totally neutral. There's deep thinkers on all stripes, and they pretty much cover all stripes. I'm in it. I certainly wouldn't consider myself one of the major thought leaders that's in the movie, but I was honored to be in it. But there are some really deep thinkers in there, and it's just well done, well put together. And I'm not saying that because I have a brief role 3 or 4 times in it. It's the overall structure of the movie itself will actually answer almost any question you have about why in the heck are we where we are now, and projecting from there, where are we going, which right now it's pretty apparent we're going to go into a major contraction on a global basis due to the supply chain breakdown, and things that we need are going to cost a lot more, and things that we want really aren't going to mean so much.
Right, and I watched your video that you uploaded 2 weeks ago, What is NESARA and Does It Matter to Me? Well, it seems that there is definitely truth to it. Call it NESARA, call it RV, call it GCR, JASARA, whatever you want to call it. What's been driving me and a lot of people crazy is the fact that we've been hearing that it's going to happen and it's going to come to fruition ever since like 2012, and the old joke that James Gilliland's made out of it that it's going to happen next Tuesday. It's really starting to get kind of annoying and disturbing, because we all eventually want to be done with money to the point where we basically live under a socialist system where money doesn't exist and technology is not suppressed, so everybody can get what they need and then some, and there's going to be no greed in the equation. But that's all wishful thinking. But as the story goes, people who say, well, we can't go to a gold standard because there's not enough gold out there. No. They apparently don't know the whole story. As people like Benjamin Fulford have reported, there are some secret caverns and tunnels in the area of the world around Indochina, which are storing a lot of gold and silver that the Chinese Brotherhood dragon families that allegedly don't want to be part of the communist system have stored away. And the plan, as the story goes, is when NESARA does happen, all this gold is going to get released and it's going to be distributed around the world. Now, my biggest concern about that, if it's true, is some of the countries are going to be like, well, my country deserves more gold than your country because blah, blah, blah. And well, that's going to cause a lot of greedy wars to start, because people think they deserve more gold than the other country. And what plans could be in place to prevent that from happening, I don't know. But why don't you maybe give a brief overview of what you talked about in that NESARA Doesn't Matter to Me, and what you know about it, and is any of this stuff that I've just mentioned, have you heard anything about it?
Sure, I'd be happy to. You're probably way ahead of me on NESARA. I just ran across it because I've been commissioned to do some research on the mark of the beast. Whether you take it as a metaphor or reality, that's up to you. I was just taking it from a financial aspect. And so in my dive, and I'm continuing the dive, I ran across this. And so when I wrote about it, I had several questions. And one of them was it in the Federal Register? I have a pretty good legal background, self-taught from legal researcher that taught me a great deal. And I understand that if it's not in the Federal Register, it's basically bogus. In other words, until it's been through Congress or whatever. And is it secret or whatever? I don't know. I don't know enough to answer whether it's legitimate or not. My point about it was it sounds too good to be true, so it may be. But it also equates for the people that believe the Bible or something close to that eschatology, is that this idea that we're all going to get stuck with the Bill Gates goody two-shoes system, most people, no matter where they are, religiously or spiritually, are against it. So that's most likely not to happen. I mean, it could, but not for everybody. There are too many people who are going to resist it. So the NESARA thing is like everything lines up. It lines up with higher moral standards, more openness toward everybody, more transparency, a better monetary system. I mean, anything that we want, talking to your neighbor, pretty much lines up with that outline. And that to me was rather profound. And like I said, you've probably known about it much longer than I have. I'm really just diving into it, as I said. But it also brought up the idea on the eschatology of, well, if you're going to take something that's going to allow you to buy and sell, then it's much more likely that it'd be something that lines up almost perfectly with what would be fair to everybody on the planet. And that Nasara outlines that very well in my view and most people's view. It's like, yeah, this is what we need. This is what we want. This is fair. This is right. This is just. This is moral. This is correct. And so it certainly got me interested in going even further into the idea of what is the future looking like. And one that I'm almost certain about, I could say this, I'm like 99.999% certain, is we're going to a cashless system. We're probably going to a digital currency. And I've written about this in the Morgan Report in the April issue on the economic collapse issue. That Mark Carney, who's the leader of the banking system in England or in the UK, says that what they want, the bankers want, is a non-backed digital currency that's unlimited. So MMT, modern money theory, doesn't matter how much money you print, it doesn't matter, which is a lie, but that's what they want. And that it's backed by absolutely nothing. That's what they want. And they want total control. And they want to make sure that everybody is what they call banked. In other words, they want a DNA sample, an iris scan, a fingerprint, who knows what, but you are you. And there's no way out of it. And the only way to be doing any transactions in the future is based on your identification, that 2020 ID that's out there lurking around. So very fascinating to learn about it. What's so interesting for my personal life was one of my friends that's probably oriented a little closer to your thoughts, Andrew, and I'm just guessing this, of course, but quite a spiritual guy. And he said, what do you think about Nasara? And I said, what is it? So I looked it up. And then that, being the kind of person I am, really got me going. I go, man, I got to find out more about this. And then I started looking deeper and deeper and deeper, found a couple websites, saw some people that really studied it pretty much in depth. And that's when I put out that video, what is Nasara and what does it mean to you?
I'm glad you put it out, and everybody can make of it whatever they will. But again, it's really annoying that we hear that it's going to happen next Tuesday and it doesn't. And the excuse that I always hear is that, well, the banks refuse to surrender. They're not going down without a fight. And my answer to that is that a good excuse, or is that really what's going on? Or are you just not trying hard enough to stop the banks from pushing their agenda? Well, maybe it's a little bit of both. I don't know. But as the story goes, it's going to happen in the near future, apparently. And Bo Polney recently did an interview on the USA Watchdog with Greg Hunter radio show. Bo seems to be a very religious guy of sorts, and I actually downloaded his God's New Era thing, where he actually, and I bring this up now, he one of the pages on page 7, Jesus Ascension tomorrow, May 21st, 2020. Jesus ascends to heaven 40 days after Easter. April 12th plus 40 days equals May 21st. Wait, stay, and be patient. Something great is about to happen. And then he quotes a couple biblical things. And then, after that, he talks about how October and the cycle he's talking about seems to end December 17th, 2023. What's going to happen up until then, he thinks the gold standard will happen before then, but he's getting all biblical with this, and a lot of people who are not Christian would easily dismiss this. But I don't know. I mean, you look at the Bible code, and for those who know what it is, I mean, there seems to be some truth behind that, the Bible code, that it's not bound by time, and we all seem to be connected at a spiritual level to the point where something like that can be encoded in books. So I don't think Bo deserves to be called a lunatic for looking at this stuff. But this idea that it could happen in the very near future. I mean, I don't want you to give dates and have egg in your face or anything like that, but if I'm going to ask you, what do you see in regards to this? Do you think maybe there is any truth to Bo Polney's predictions that the upcoming near future is going to be very big in regards to us getting off the fiat system and getting into an actual money system that is decent?
Yeah, it's a great question again. And I met Bo at the Silver Summit here in Spokane, where I live, several years ago. I'm going to just stab at it, maybe 5 or 6. And he actually spoke before me. So I was in the room and listened to the last, I don't know, 15, 20 minutes of the speech. And was pretty impressed by him, actually. But his timing was different than mine. His projection for where gold and silver were going were extremely similar to mine, but the time frame was different. So having said that, this time our timing is very similar. Usually most markets go up in 3 legs up and 2 legs down. We had a pretty major market in the silver market going from like under 5 all the way up to 21. And then the financial crisis of 2008 was a down move from 21 down to about 9 or 8 something. And then from there, it shot all the way up from $8.59 all the way to 50. That was the second leg up. So we had one up, one down, one up. And then we had this long, drawn out, contracted down move from $50 silver all the way down to where it hit 12 just recently. And now it's starting on its way back up. The last leg is usually the longest leg as far as price movement, but not so long in duration. That's where I came to this idea that Jeff Christian gave us, that 90% of the move comes in the last 10% of the time. If you look at the last bull market in silver and gold, silver took 14, 15 years to go from 1965 at $1.29 an ounce to $6 in January 1979. But from January 1979 to January 1980, it went up over 800% in a year. And that's the kind of move I expect. I'm not saying it's going up 800% in a year. What I'm trying to give is the idea that most of the move comes in the last leg up, and we're just beginning that. My thoughts are that we probably got about 3 years, and we're probably going to see, gold go from X to Y. And what's X and what's Y? Well, X is 1550, where it broke out of this long consolidation. So we're definitely technically in a bull market for gold. And is it going to 5,000? Is it going to 10,000? Is it going to 15,000? The answer is I don't know. What I do know is that it's going higher. It's going substantially higher. And at some point, the paper price might not matter. The paper price of gold didn't really matter in Zimbabwe. What mattered is what you could trade it for. And silver will probably outperform gold. In fact, I'm almost certain that it will. But it will take gold to get going on an accelerated basis, which I see is probably a year out or so. But I do think the peak in gold and silver are probably 3 years out, something like that, 5 at the most. So I think 2021 will be where a lot of people are coming back into the precious metals. And if I had to stab at a number, you're probably going to be in a nominal high for gold, like in the 2,500 range, something like that. It'll be above the 1,900 range. That was its last high. And silver may still be low its $50 level at that time. I don't know, but it will catch up to gold, and it will accelerate beyond gold at some point. So at the top of the market, they're going to be substantially higher in price than they are now. So I agree with him. I agree with the time, too. I think he's pretty much got it right. I did watch that interview. In fact, I watched it twice. I watched it all the way through, and then I went back and kind of watched it in segments. And I don't get all of it, but he does, and that's fine. And he did a pretty good presentation. He's obviously pretty fired up about it. But some of the stuff that he said resonated with me. I really thought that, some of the stuff, like I said, I just, I don't know. But what I do know is that there is going to be a run to gold. Religious or secular, doesn't matter, because money transcends everything. Money is something that people think about almost constantly, whether you're rich or poor, whatever nation state you're adhered to, whatever tribe you belong to, whatever your political leanings left or right, doesn't matter. Money transcends everything. So because of that, I made it, my passion to look at it primarily from a secular perspective. Although I am doing this deep dive on a religious perspective because I've been asked to, and it's rather interesting to do it from that perspective. And certainly hold my personal views away from the public and try to do it on as objectively as possible. I mean, you can make the argument that the whole Revelation thing is being orchestrated by the Zionists. They're going to make sure that that book is going to come to fruition because they want it to. I mean, I'm not saying that's the case. I'm just saying that you really have to think about these things, and I do. And what the absolute truth is on some of these matters, I think, is indeterminable. But so I probably strayed off the question a little bit, but time, yeah, I think he's right on. I mean, not to the exact day. I mean, I don't know about May 21st. I have no idea. What I do know is that the markets are poised for that last leg up, and it's going to be phenomenal.
Yeah, May 21st was just the Jesus Ascension thing. I didn't get a chance to read the whole entire report in its entirety, but I did upload it here. Just thought I'd make reference to it. Boy, I seem to be running out of questions, and not such a bad thing that we're probably not going to go 2 hours. Like I said, people have lousy attention spans, but there is one area I do want to cover. I don't know how much of an expert you are on this, but I think it definitely needs to be covered because it really disturbs me that the only people that seem disturbed about this issue are the socialists. But I see no reason why people that support capitalism over socialism should be against this either. I think they should be against this too. And that, of course, is the derivatives issue, because it seems like nobody understands derivatives. You try to explain what a derivative is and give a 1 or 2 sentence definition, someone's going to say something after they hear the definition like, well, what's that mean in American? Because it's really complicated, and give a long description of what it is, you're going to lose someone. But basically, the crux of it involves a bet on the future. And the issue, though, is that reckless gambling is affecting the average person's life in negative ways because of the reckless gambling affecting lives, and the stock market being like what we should view our life relation to and whatnot. And that is disturbing a lot of people that are socialist, and the socialist seems more disturbed by it. Bernie Sanders was like the only politician that I found with a video searching for on YouTube who opposed derivatives, and Webster Tarpley, who's a brilliant guy, but some of his socialist policies don't seem to be appropriate for the real world where money exists, because capitalism always works better than socialism in a world where money exists. He seems to be the only guy opposed to derivatives, but I assert capitalists should be against them too, because reckless gambling, people with bad habits of reckless gambling should not be affecting the lives of good people in negative ways, but that's what derivatives do. So with that being said, do you have any solutions to how the derivatives market could possibly be solved in conjunction with hopefully someday going back to a gold silver standard?
Nothing like putting me on the spot, Andrew. Yeah, I do have some thoughts. So let me try to break it down logically. I think one of the foremost points to put across is that we had a pretty good system to have a check and balance on the speculative part of the markets. And this was under a system where we had a law that was put out during the 30s under the Roosevelt administration. I'm not really a big fan of Roosevelt, but certainly I give credit where credit is due. And they had a system where you were either a commercial bank, which was like loans for houses and farms, or you had an investment bank, and you couldn't mix them. So if you wanted to gamble, you had to gamble with an investment bank. But if you wanted to invest in hardcore wealth like farms, homes, roads, warehouses, industrial parks, that kind of thing, you went to the commercial banks. But that was obliterated under the Clinton administration and was done away with with this stroke of a pen. And once that was accomplished, then we started to mix these banks that were never able to be in the stock market before to get into the stock market and get this casino going. Derivatives, I'm with you. It's gone far, far, far too big, because the derivatives markets basically run the system now. Whereas the idea of a derivative is that you have gold. Gold is your element. Well, let's just use wheat. You have wheat. That's a hard commodity. Everybody knows it's used to make bread. and other foods, but primarily, bread products. And it is determined basically by the labor costs of the farmer that produces it. And he's got to make a profit or he's not going to be able to grow wheat the next year. And so because the price moves up and down, the futures market was created that he could hedge. So if wheat was going to be, he needed X amount for his wheat to break even, and it got to X plus 10%, and he was happy with a 10% profit, he could use the futures market and lock in that price. Now, it might go to X plus 20%, he could have made more profit, but he said, no, I'm good with the 15%, I'm good, and lock it in. So the basic idea behind it is actually pretty sound, but it got brutalized by the bankers and the financial system. So one way to ring in the derivatives is that you're not allowed to write more derivatives than what exists. So like using silver, which is the market I'm probably the most familiar with, that if you only mine 750 million ounces in a year, the most you could ever have on the futures exchange in a derivative format is 750 million ounces. If you go beyond that, the trade does not take place because the silver does not exist. In fact, 750 actually doesn't exist either, but you're at least able to hedge every ounce that is more than likely going to be produced within a year's time frame. And of course, the argument is, well, I got to hedge out for 3 years because my mine's going to take 3 years to build. And if I can't hedge my product ahead of time, I might not have the money to make my mine. And if it drops in price and I can't hedge, I'm screwed. Well, okay, fine. Then don't build your mine. I don't know the answers for that. I'm really trying to be smart here, but the derivatives have gotten totally out of hand. And this whole idea of this casino gambling situation is absolutely accurate. The stock market used to be reflective of the physical economy. I mean, if you had certain businesses going up in value, not in price, in value, because they were becoming more valuable to society at large, that was coherent with a moral structure where it reflected the true physical economy. But those days are long gone, very long gone. If you want a good explanation of a derivative, I think The Big Short, the movie The Big Short, or the book, will probably give you a good one. But basically, again, basically a derivative is just a bet on an underlying asset. An asset is something you can go touch. An asset is gold, silver, rice, corn, wood, a cow, a milk cow, piece of concrete, bag of concrete, anything that you can go touch that's physical and needed is wealth. So a derivative on concrete is a bet that the price of concrete is going up or down. That's a derivative. And then there's a derivative on a derivative. Someone could bet that the guy that bet that it's going up, they're betting that it's not going to go up as fast as he thinks it is. It's going to go up at a slower rate than his bet. So there's a bet on that bet. And then somebody behind him says, well, this guy doesn't know what he's doing. I'm betting that it's not going up nearly as fast as that guy says it is. I'm betting on his bet. And on it goes into oblivion. And it's totally ridiculous. And that's the system we're in right now.
Yeah, it is. It is ridiculous. And when I had Winston Shroud on the program, poor guy is apparently going to serve a 10-year prison sentence because they allegedly committed fraud with his sovereign citizen presentations and all. But when I did have him on, he tried to simplify the derivative issue by saying it can be best described as anything that takes harmony out of zero. In which, what he means by that is there's everything that exists and money that can pay for everything that exists, and because they're betting on the underlying assets in the future, it takes the harmony out of the value of those two things equaling zero. And people are free to listen to that interview that I did with him to get in the inside on how that works. And also I did an interview with Karen Mutton, who did a presentation in Australia in the not too distant past about the financial system and derivatives. I was very impressed with, to the point where I decided to get her on the show, and that was a good interview where people can learn about that too. But David Morgan, I think I may have run out of questions, but before I end the show, I'd like you to give you the chance to get out anything you like, anything you want to say, plug your website. If you want to make a sales pitch out of anything that you offer, by all means, and any future conferences you're going to be, well, of course, you probably don't know when conferences are going to be held because of the coronavirus. Oh, I shouldn't say that word. I'm probably not going to get monetized now. But the COVID-19 scandal thing, whatever, shutting down a lot of things. But if you are planning to speak at a future event, you can get that out too. So anything you like, let's close this out.
Sure. Well, I was having a senior moment there. I kept talking, but trying to think of the name of the act. It's called the Glass-Steagall Act, which was repealed under Clinton. And if that were in place, we wouldn't have nearly the disruptions and the misallocation of capital that we have now. So you can look it up. It's Glass, Glass, dash Steagall is Steagall. And I was at the Money Show way back, I'm just going to guess about 15 years ago, back when Karen Gibbs, who used to work for, I think, CNBC, was the hostess, and she interviewed me on basically the same question: how do we fix this? I go, well, we broke it under taking the Glass-Steagall Act away. You know, if we had commercial banks that really serve the people and let these gamblers do their thing, you would know. If you want to go to Goldman Sachs and make all these wild bets on stuff, go ahead. I'm free market. Do it. But at least there was a line that was immovable, that if you were just producing wheat, or a dairy farmer, or construction guy building homes and apartments, or let's say just basic America, and just get right to it, you'd go to a commercial bank and your savings were pretty much intact and used for infrastructure, useful projects, building real wealth. If you wanted to go into the investment banking side, which is necessary in my view, like coming up with a better way to do something, or making a computer faster or whatever. I mean, there's our uses, but still, you knew you were taking a very high risk, potentially high reward bet, but it wasn't affecting the real economy. Then go ahead. But when they mixed the two and blurred it and made everybody a big casino, it's ruined the whole system. So let me get that out. Glass-Steagall, sorry, I was having a bit of a senior moment. As far as the report goes, the main landing page is called themorganreport.com, all one word. There is the word the. It's themorgan, M-O-R-G-A-N, report.com. When you get on there, the best thing to do is get something for free, and that is just give me an email. Give me a name and your email. We'll send you a link that you have to click to double opt in. It's the way our server is set up. And I will post interviews like this whenever I do them, that the host allows me to repost them. I'll just send them out to you directly so you don't have to search for them. And the other place to go for free is the blog. And there's a pull down menu at the top of the page. If you click the blog tab, you come and you also see most of the interviews I do. If you're so inclined to buy some silver now, even though the spreads are very high, there is a little ad over on the right-hand side. It's called OWN, O-W-N, and 2 bars, an X in green. It says Access, Automation, Accumulation. Kind of an odd name. It used to be called Silver Saver, which was a lot more viable to what it is. It's a savings program in precious metals for the average person. But anyway, the icon's still there. It's called OwnX. You could click that, and you can buy silver basically at 6% over the spot price, rather than these, $8, $9 type things. It's all explained on the webpage when you click that. And in addition to that, again, I'm on the blog. At the very top banner, it says latest news. It's a black line. It's kind of thin, actually. But in that thin line, pretty small, there's icons. There's an icon for our YouTube channel, an icon for the Twitter channel, an icon for the LinkedIn channel, an icon for the Facebook channel, and there's the site map as well. So we do have a YouTube channel that's got a pretty good following. Twitter, I've got a pretty huge following. LinkedIn, not so much. Facebook, I really don't like it, but it's a corporate page. I don't know if you can be my friend or not. I have the girls in the Philippines do that for me, but basically it posts most of the interviews that I do like this and the weekly commentary that I do on Facebook. So, Facebook crowd has it available to them. So that's it. I think I've pitched everything that I'd want. I'm not even interested in getting anyone on the full paid report. Of course, you're free to look at that sales page if you wish. But I think in these times, just buying a little silver might not be a bad thing, but that's after you have secured as much as you can, being debt-free, living within your means, and taking care of business, which means, probably some extra food at this point. So I would not recommend anybody start stacking silver right now if you haven't taken care of the absolute basics for yourself and those you care about, because things are going to tighten up. It's not the end of the world. It's not the end, but it is moving a different direction than most of us have been witnessing for quite some time. We hit the top. The reign of plenty is done. It's now the reign of live within your means and be grateful for what you have. There's going to be less around.
Yes, and since you mentioned that get your debts off before you buy gold and silver, I think I should point out something that I've pointed out recently. I used to make a joke out of how if this whole economic currency reset happens, then why don't we just do ourselves a favor by maxing out our credit cards and taking out as many loans as possible to buy as much gold and silver as possible. When the currency reset happens, we get to keep all that gold and silver because all the debts that we accrued are going to be wiped out. No, sorry folks, don't do that. It's a stupid idea, and I can give you a spiritual but not religious reason as to why it's a stupid idea. And that's because credit card debt is a good way of measuring karma. If you build up credit card debt, you got bad karma, and it's going to look really bad on your life report card if you generate a lot of karma by trying to cheat the system by racking up a lot of credit card debt to buy as much gold and silver as you can before the economic reset. Sorry, it doesn't work that way. Get your debts off before you buy the gold and silver, and only buy as much gold and silver as you can reasonably afford. So wanted to get that out. It was a pleasure having you on. Great interview. I will upload this to YouTube by midnight tomorrow, and you are more than welcome to upload it to the Morgan Report channel as well. I encourage you to do that by all means, because I'm sure you're going to get a lot more viewers than I do, a lot more subscribers you have than I do. So I'll send you the link when I do. And good luck to you, and maybe I'll run into you at a future conference, because I would like to go to some gold and silver conference in the future after seeing some of the great presentations that you and the other people gave. So pleasure having you on, David. Good luck. Take care.
Thank you, Andrew. It was fun. I really enjoyed it.
I enjoyed it too.